I've had a few people reach out with regards to Lab 6 and getting the examples to run, so specifically the PHP examples. So I'm just going to walk you through what that looks like in getting PHP up and running. So you'll notice that PHP does not run through a traditional live server. So I'm in Visual Studio Code right now. I have an HTML page. So I'm looking at my file system, and I have a folder on my desktop called Lab 6 with a file index.html. So if I go ahead and fill out this HTML page, so here's my sample HTML page, and I'll just have an h1 tag, Brian's sample, and save that file. I can run this through a live server. And the way I would set up the live server is I have to go to my extensions, and right now I don't have a live server. I don't have any extensions installed. This is just a completely clean machine. I'm going to search for live server, and you'll see that there's an option to install that live server, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. It'll take a second here while that's installing. Okay, but that live server is limited in terms of what applications it can actually run and what it can actually host. All it's going to do is it's going to read from the file system, and it's going to render the content from that file system. So it won't run any server-side code is kind of the limitation of the live server. But it will render my HTML page, and I can see that if I go to the View menu, and I can go to the Command palette, and I can bring up the live server. So I can open this with the live server. And I'm running a fairly old Windows machine, so you'll see it's kind of running a little bit slower, but I'm going to allow access. And then I should be able to see that HTML page. However, if I try to go over to the project and I go back to the file system and I create another file, which is actually going to be a PHP file, so index.php, and I try to create a PHP file, and I echo out hello world, something like that, this will not run successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I want to see that in my live server, so if I bounce back over to the browser, I should be able to go to index.php, and you'll notice it's trying to save that file. And the reason it's trying to save that file is because the live server is literally reading the contents of that PHP file and sending the file contents directly to the browser, and the browser is saying, hey, I don't know how to render PHP. PHP is a server-side programming language, and I can't run PHP code, so do you want to download it? On other web servers, you might see it actually just render out the PHP code, but that's indicative of the fact that your web server, the live server, can't render that PHP code. And by render the PHP code, what I mean is it's not capable of executing your PHP code. So it basically just grabs the contents of your code and tries to send them to the client, your browser. And that's not what you want. You want your PHP code to actually execute, or whatever your server-side code is. And the example that we're using is in PHP. So I want to show you how to get this wired up. And the way I'm going to do that is, there's a couple of things I'm going to do. Is I'm going to stop the live server. Okay, so I'm going to look at the command palette. I want to stop the live server. So I think I can just come down to this port, and I think I can just stop this. So I just was able to click it, and you can see the server is now offline. I actually don't want to run PHP through the live server. What I want to do is I want to run it through the PHP server. But before I do that is I'm going to go out and I'm going to download PHP onto this machine. So I'm just doing a search, php.net download, and it'll take me to the php.net/downloads page. And since I'm on a Windows machine, I'm going to go to the Windows downloads. And I'm going to download that zip file. Okay, and I'm going to grab the thread safe version of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this link on my, I'm going to save it right on the C drive. So I'm going to the C drive, and that's where I'm going to save this. And it looks like it's going to complain about me putting it on the C drive. I guess, no, I don't want to put it in the B. Witkowski folder. I'm going to put it right on my desktop, which it'll allow me to do. Okay, and so now I should have that zip file on my desktop. I'm going to go ahead and extract it. So I'm going to extract all, and that looks fine. So I'm just unzipping that PHP download. And again, this is a fairly old machine, so you'll see it kind of hanging up on the extraction. And what I want to do is, once this is complete, I'm going to have a folder that has the PHP contents. It's actually the executable that would execute PHP on the server. So it's going to be in this folder right here. And this folder, I don't necessarily want it on my desktop. By having it on my desktop, it's going to be in a weird spot. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename this folder. I'm going to rename the folder PHP, and then I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to paste it, I think, onto the C drive. I hope I have permission to do that. I think I should. So I have that stuff that I just downloaded, that PHP folder, now right on the root of my hard drive. So just on the C drive, there's this PHP folder. Okay, so this is the PHP installation. Okay, and I no longer need the zip file. I can delete the zip file. Okay, once I've done that, then I can go back over to Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to go back to the extensions, and instead of looking for a live server, I'm looking for a PHP server. Okay, so here's my PHP server. I'm going to go ahead and install that. Okay, and once it's installed, then there's a little bit of configuration that I have to do, and I'm going to go to this Manage right here, and I'm going to go to the extension settings, and there's a couple of things that I have to do. So the PHP server's IP address, localhost is fine. It's asking for the path to the PHP configuration file, the PHP INI file, and it's asking for the path to the PHP executable. Okay, so now if I go back over to the file system, I go to the C drive and that PHP folder, you'll see that if I scroll down, there's a PHP INI file right here. So this development one, I'm going to rename, so it's just php.ini, and I'm getting rid of the dash development. So I'm going to change the file extension there. And then if I look further in the bin directory, I guess it's not in the bin directory anymore. Right at the root of the C drive in that PHP folder, there's this php.exe. So these are the two files that are going to be important to that file or that Visual Studio Code extension. So it's asking for the path for the INI file. So the path to the INI file is C, PHP, and then the file name is php.ini. And then the path to the executable is going to be C, PHP, and then php.exe. Okay, so now the configuration should be done with the settings. And now if I want to run this PHP file and not have it get downloaded, so I can go back over to the Explorer, what I can do is I can go to the command palette, and there should be a PHP server where I can serve the project. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and use that, so it's serving the project, and you'll notice now it's issuing this hello world. Okay, so it's actually executing that PHP code and it's rendering it. The browser's not trying to download that file, and the reason why is because now that PHP server extension that's actually set up through Visual Studio Code is able to execute the PHP and send the resultant output to the browser as opposed to the raw PHP code. Okay, so that's the setup to actually run a PHP application in Visual Studio Code on Windows.